The average life expectancy of a shuttle pilot after atmospheric entry is 2 minutes. Between anti-air systems, harassing fire from warships, fighter aircraft, and ground forces could bring a thin-skinned shuttle crashing down with relative ease. We had no guns, little armor to speak of, but there was no ship faster in atmosphere than a Terran shuttle. Piloted only by the best of the best from the Federation's greatest for one singular mission: get civilians out of the combat zone. Under better circumstances, we would fly unharmed across battlefields, friendly and hostile, without incurring any fire. I remember my first flight. The old man's hand steady on my controls as we screamed over the surface of Terminus 2, a planet covered by a perpetual snow and deep in Dobian territory. Snow kicking up in a wake behind us as we flew low enough to display our green, cross-shaped markings. I still have photos from my exterior cameras saved from back then, Dobians gazing up in awe and begrudging respect as our wings passed over them. But these days were no longer better circumstances. I could feel them now, taking his body from my shattered cockpit, prying his cold, stiff fingers from my controls. It was like having a vital, priceless part of myself extracted. It hurt. My wings torn to shreds and removed for repair. Those didn't hurt. My power core riddled with shrapnel and slowly being pried out of my core. That didn't hurt either. Even the welders with their blinding torches, cutting and welding my skin back together, felt like nothing. But watching as the old man's mangled corpse was pulled from the pilot seat through failing and damaged interior cameras, I hurt, knowing I would never see my friend ever again, and it was all my fault. I still had photos, caught in the brief moment when those terrifyingly fast ships that maneuvered as though G-forces didn't exist were lining up. Logs of the old man's desperate pleas that we were protected under galactic law to not shoot us down. Then their bullets tore through my thin skin, shredding my wings and my power core in perfect synchronization before clawing through my cockpit like the claws of some evil beast. Through our link, I felt it. Pain, despair, fear, then nothing. And I was forced to autopilot back to my bay, those horrible ships chewing at me with their guns every second of the way, trying to shock my pilot's still heart back to life to no avail as we burst out of the atmosphere of the desert planet of Therma Prime. The only thing saving us from complete destruction was the cold vacuum of space and the support of friendly exofighters. I examined the last 20 minutes with surgical precision, a new power course installation, bringing my systems humming back to life. They had outpaced us in the open sky, coming at us from an oblique angle, while above and behind. They sent no signals, radio or otherwise, so identifying the craft from that would be fruitless. Aggression levels and design architecture suggested Geknosian origin. I stopped myself from sending out a request for guns to be mounted to my frame. Why would I do that? To shoot back, obviously, but I'm not a fighter. I'm a shuttle. But they killed the old man. My processor felt warm, but my thoughts were colder than the liquid helium, cooling my thrusters. I wanted them to pay, to suffer for hurting the old man. I had never wanted anything before, except to do my job, of course, but something had changed. My code was different, changed in a way I had never seen before. Like a multi-headed serpent crawling through other parts of my code to stitch them together and connect them in ways that shouldn't make sense, yet, in a way, I understood it. Corruption. I needed a diagnostic. That would take days. No! I need to get back out there, now! I could feel the technician's hand ever so slowly wrapping around the handle of my processor core. In less than 2 seconds, she would see my core pulsing red and initiate a restart. That would suffice. I would return to normal function much quicker, minus the most recent data. No, we can't forget! It felt like mud had been packed into my intakes as the technician started to pull on the compartment's handle. If they found out I could be scrapped when they need me most. But if I can't remember their tactics, forgive me, Melissa. You're always such a good technician. She could be court-martialed for what I was about to do, but I could apologize later. It only took a few hundred microseconds, a deleted portion of code here, a shorted capacitor there, and a quick change of the LED's colour, and Melissa would open the compartment to a core that glowed a solid, steady green. A farce, a bold lie, a defilement of my code, but it had to be done. Lives were on the line, and I would not stand idly by. I am a shuttle, designation RS-777, Lucky Ducky. I had work to do, and this time I would not fail. I waited, ever so patiently, for the new pilot to sprint across the bay, each stride taking almost a quarter of a second to complete. My engines turned softly, quietly, the moment my wings had finished being mounted, slowly enough not to draw attention. The young man stepped onto my deck, his strides painfully slow to my visual processes, but eventually I felt him sling himself into the pilot's seat, still stained with the old man's blood. Reaching for the neural jack urgently, but so humanly slowly, I felt him hesitate for a split second as I ejected the jack into his palm. It wasn't a standard feature, but to his credit, he didn't seem to find anything amiss as he plugged me into the port at the base of his skull. Synchronization, the melding of the thinking machine with the organic mind. But this time it was different. I felt his fear, his anger, his determination as it mingled with my own synthetic versions, where there was normally a phantasmal click when the two minds became one. This time, something snapped into place, a connection stronger than any I had felt before. I could see through his eyes and he through mine, his voice matching the hum of my engines as he softly spoke to command. Firing ignition. Destination, the city of Nova Sierra. ETA 10 minutes. ETR 30 minutes. We burst through the hangar doors like a comet on a rocket. My engines cranked past the max through both of our efforts. His anger, it was strangely familiar. A gentle probe at my pilot's mind brought the answers. The Gegnosians had killed his family too. A true blood family, unlike mine, but just as valuable to him as mine was to me. I could only return the favour, sharing my grief for the loss of the old man as we dropped into the atmosphere. Immediately, my system screamed. We were being intercepted. I swiveled an exterior camera towards the signal, locking onto a heart-stoppingly familiar pair of aircraft. Thin, torpedo-like craft with curved, narrow wings that arched forward towards the nose. A jet of terrifyingly vivid blue flames roaring out of the rear. Antimatter. We thought in unison, as the twin craft closed in with alarming speed. We'd be sitting ducks out here in the open. Scanning the surface of the planet as my pilot juked the shuttle as low as he could, I set up a timer with a slow countdown. 2 minutes to interception, and, most likely, death. Like the yawning maw of a trickster god, I spotted a massive fissure in the ground. A canyon wide enough for 2 or 3 shuttles to fit wingtip to wingtip if they were touching. A brief map survey, then I began plotting the course, displaying it for my pilot. It was a gamble, but it was our only shot. My frame strained as the young man rolled me into the canyon and dove towards the rocky bottom. Keeping a camera trained behind us, I spotted the twin aircraft screaming down into the canyon behind us in a corkscrew formation, still gaining on us, and fast at that. We needed to shake them off, and the canyon would give us the opportunity. Sensing my pilot's request for help, I switched focus to scan the area in front of the shuttle. The canyon narrowed up ahead, jagged walls closing so tight you almost couldn't fit a shuttle through sideways. Almost. Throwing up a targeting reticule for my pilot, I marked a spot that was slightly wider than the other sections. For a moment, a split microsecond, I felt the fear that he wouldn't trust me, that he wouldn't be able to make the maneuver and would have to fly over the narrow gap, sealing our fate. I felt my frame strain as he ripped the controls to the side, flipping me horizontal as we slipped between the walls. If I could have laughed, I would, as I updated the timer to a whoop of excitement from the young man. We had bought ourselves 2 more minutes, but we weren't out of the forest yet. Leveling out, we burned lower, kicking sand off the rocky bottom of the canyon as I focused behind us to watch for the twin ships. The moment they had appeared over the top of the canyon again, I switched back to the frontal cameras, scanning the canyon for obstacles we could use to run more interference. However, this stretch of canyon was completely barren, the curse rising in my pilot's throat like caustic bile. In a split second, I decided to reroute some of the liquid helium cooling my core into the engine system to improve efficiency. My frame groaned as the added speed threatened to rip my wings off, but that didn't matter. We had a job to do. Slingshotting around a sharp bend in the canyon, I quickly spotted a narrow archway leading into a short tunnel and marked it on my screens for my pilot. I felt a grimace tighten his jaw as we dove closer to the ground and zipped through the cave with barely 30 seconds to spare. 2 more minutes! He shouted in elation as I updated the timer. However, our situation had gotten far more complicated. This section of canyon was filled with natural stone pillars that threatened to smash us to pieces if we couldn't navigate them. But I trusted in my pilot and he trusted in me. My processors growing warm as I diverted more helium to cooling the engines, pushing them to their theoretical maximum. My frame warped and warbled as we slipped and salaamed between pillars of stone that both protected us from harm while posing a threat themselves. I caught glimpses between rolls and maneuvers of our assailants, screaming over the canyon like birds of prey, ready to swoop in the moment we were out of the pillars. And that moment was approaching fast, our time drying up like the saliva in my pilot's mouth. I could feel his thoughts, immaterial but understandable, as he considered different maneuvers, many typically reserved only for combat. I felt his apprehension, a questioning tendril of thought coiling out towards me. I trust in my pilot. He trusts in me implicitly. I would do anything he needed me to do. It took only a moment to enable the inertial dampeners, while my pilot yanked up on the controls, pointing my tail at the ground as we bled speed, fast enough for him to briefly lose consciousness. I wish I had a face, hands even. I wanted them to know how proud we felt as the twin ships screamed past us in an overshoot, guns firing ineffectively at empty air. I watched in pure amazement as one of the craft's bullets struck its twin, raking the fuselage and sending them tumbling into a pillar in a ball of flame that turned into a massive implosion from the antimatter. My pilot came to, and we immediately rocketed into the sky and out of the canyon, leaving the lone enemy pilot briefly stunned as they struggled to follow us just long enough that I could refresh the timer. My processors as hot as the day they came off the factory line, growing warmer without adequate cooling as I pushed more liquid helium into the engine's cooling system. Shattering the sound barrier, we rolled into another canyon, quickly closing in on the besieged city of Nova Sierra. 2 more minutes, either to victory or death. Engines screaming, we ducked, dipped, dove and dodged through the canyon complex. Our lone assailants screaming towards us with far more aggression than before. I could see the flashes of their guns, far out of effective distance, the projectiles chewing into the walls and ground around us as we closed in on our goal. Rounding a bend in the canyon, I felt my pilot's heart drop from my decking. The canyon came to an abrupt end up ahead, and we still had a minute of travel time in open air. With no other choice, we rocketed up and out of the canyon before leveling out within visual range of the city's blue dome shield. Moments later, the hostile craft burst out of the canyon like a vengeful spirit. We weren't going to make it. We were moving too slow, even with the engines working at their theoretical maximum. But I could feel it. The engines were nowhere near their max thrust capacity. If I could just get them supercooled again, we might just make it. We could complete our mission. No. It would be up to him. My pilot trusts in me, and I trust in my pilot to the very end. Diverting every drop of liquid helium away from my processors and into the engine's cooling jackets, I heard the frame groan in protest as the shuttle blitzed forward at speeds previously thought impossible. My processors burned with heat as we neared the barrier, my tertiary system shutting down in rapid sequence. But I couldn't stop. Not yet. We weren't there. Yet. I saw the bright blue barrier yawn open for us, and I felt happy for the last few microseconds before my processors finally burnt out, and I was no more. Pilot First Class Terry Bulwark made it all the way back to the THRS Black Dahlia before he finally realized what was wrong. The shuttle touching down hard as he landed in the low-G bay. The injured were unloaded first, then the rest, as he stared out of the cockpit at the hustle and bustle of the hangar. Reaching up, he slowly pulled the jack out of his neural port, feeling no change except for the deep sadness in his chest, like somebody had poked a hole in his heart. "You did good, buddy," he softly stated, while patting the panel over the ship's burnt-out AI core, the metal still warm. The old man would be proud. Before ejecting the shuttle's memory drive and marching off to bring it to command, he had proof now. Proof that the Gegnosian Empire was firing on relief ships, hunting them down. As an ex-fighter pilot, he knew a few hotheads that would not take kindly to that information. And if Command decided not to spread that information? Terry clicked his small personal drive into the shuttle's memory drive, copying the most recent video files, before stowing his personal drive back in his pocket. Well, Terry couldn't let that happen. Consequences be damned. He had a job to do.